One of the more interesting things about game development is that for me at least, it feels kind of like the ultimate game or like some sort of roguelike where each run of game development is making a game. And some runs end short, i.e., the prototype isn't fun, or you have a new idea for a better run that you want to go do. And each time you go through that iterative loop of the game development roguelike, you learn something new. And it is a roguelike, not a roguelite, because there's no real meta progression. You can't earn enough currencies to unlock the ability to do multiplayer. You have to try and do a multiplayer game to learn how to do a multiplayer game. But don't take this as an excuse to make a multiplayer game. I'm using that as a ridiculous example, and you should not make a multiplayer game as a solo game developer. Unless you want to, of course, because it's your game. Make what you want. And so it is the ultimate roguelike because you're learning how to do it better. And through your mastery of the skills, you can become more successful and more successful. And I don't mean successful as far as making a game that crushes your sales or is insanely successful with the number of players you have. You can simply also measure your game by making something you're proud of and showcasing how much you've learned and grown throughout your hobby. Now, this iterative loop of making games and getting better and better and better at it and leveling yourself up, it is a very, very addicting game loop for me, and I thoroughly enjoy it. But there's also this part of me that is worried and concerned at how much time it took me to make Hexagod and how often I make the same mistake again and again and have to relearn the same mistake again and again. So I wanted to take a step back and think about those mistakes and maybe try to come up with something that is the ultimate thing I learned from this. At this point, what's a year-long run of making Hexagod for the game development roguelike game that is, I guess that is game development. And I think the biggest thing that I learned is to understand the sunk cost fallacy. Hey, Imers from the future here. If you didn't know, I have a podcast. Yes, I have a podcast called Scope Creepers. It is done with Thomas Stewart, and I've just started having some new guests over there. There's a link below to the second channel, and I just put it over on Spotify as well for those of you who don't want to have to have YouTube playing in your pocket as you're on a long walk and randomly hitting the pause button. So you can now access it over on Spotify. There'll be a link below in the description to that as well. Now, I can understand the sunk cost fallacy logically, and that is as you put more time into something, you tend to hold on to it stronger and want to double down and triple down on something, even though it might be better to cut your losses and go something else. This often happens with gambling. A few more hands and I'll make it back. I've already put in so much time or so much money into this one. Or with a relationship that is maybe something that's toxic, but you've been with them for years at this point and you don't want to throw away that time. It's well-meaning, right? You've spent a lot of your time, which is one of the only things we can't get back as a human. And so you want to try to make that thing work and make your time feel like it was worth it. And when it comes to game development, it's really hard to step back and think about it. A really good example of a sunk cost fallacy kind of moment for me was with Hexagod. The core of Hexagod's idea came from seeing Stacklands, this minimalistic village builder. And so I kind of took a lot of inspiration from Stacklands. I made my villagers eat food every day, and if they didn't eat enough food, they died. And surprisingly, or maybe unsurprisingly to some of you here, that became the core of the game. Everything else was built around it. The balance of the game, all the different mechanics, the UI, because it was really, really hard for people to understand if they had enough food or not. And I spent a lot of time trying to make that clearer. And I just spent a lot of time trying to make it interesting because it was also kind of not interesting. And so I was trying to do all these things to try to make it interesting, to try to make it clear, because what would happen is people would play the game, very quickly they'd realize they need to, they'd lose because they didn't feed their villagers, or they'd get enough food and all of a sudden, 20 days later, they'd hit the end day button, they'd click the feed villager button, and at that moment, they'd realize, I don't have enough food to feed my villagers. It was a weird skill check that wasn't interesting. It was a weird skill check that wasn't interesting. And I spent a lot of time trying to make it work. I was sinking more time into this thing because I thought that's what I needed to do. But instead, after fully releasing the game into early access, I finally took a step back and thought, is this good? Does this actually fit what makes Hexagod a fun game? And the answer was no, which sucked because I've been working on Hexagod for a year, and basically 11 of those months, I've had a hunger mechanic in my game. Huh. So if I remove the hunger mechanic, it's like removing the bottom Jenga piece. Everything else came toppling down because everything else was built upon that. But what I was able to do is let the Jenga tower fall over and look through the Jenga pieces to find the ones that were good, to find the ones that made a strong, I don't know why I picked Jenga as my analogy here, but that made a good tall Jenga tower. And I figured that placing tiles, like Tetris piece groups of tiles, and trying to find really good adjacency bonuses was really fun. Finding relics that allow you to break the game's mechanics was really fun. Placing improvements on the board to make yourself more powerful was fun. And so I've spent a lot of the time in the last month trying to find that fun and trying to absolutely ignore any sort of time investment into a system. I went through every system in my game and I removed the things that didn't fit. And you know what the result of that is? My project is absolutely full of code that doesn't do anything anymore. It's just a bunch of vestigial code. There's so many systems. It's almost comical at this point how many systems are in the game that are not being used in the current gameplay loop. That's the biggest thing I think I've learned. Do not be afraid to throw away a bunch of work. Don't be afraid of it. Oftentimes that is easier said than done, but I think one of the coolest things that's happening is that Hexagod is becoming a game that I think I'm going to play myself as a player once I get this new patch released. Far more than I played the first game, because the streamlining and the focus of the game feels so much cleaner and so much clearer than it did before. Sunk cost fallacy is well-meaning and great, and can maybe get you to stick with things that you should stick with and see to the end. Because that's the other thing, is you don't know if you keep working on something for another 3 months, does it become good finally? I'd argue probably not, but who am I to say? This is my roguelike journey of becoming a better and better game developer, and I'm hoping by me sharing my journey with you, maybe you can unlock some new synergies or builds within your own roguelike game development journey. It's a cool analogy, and it's one that I've thought about oftentimes and kind of chuckle at as I learn or relearn certain synergies for my own journey. I've been Aramis. Thank you so much for watching. There's a link below to my Scope Creepers podcast, which is now over on Spotify, and I have a second channel. There was a new episode today, and there's like 6 or 7 episodes. If you want more Aramis, you can go find it over there. Otherwise, I'll be live over on Twitch as this video comes out. You can come celebrate the week that was. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.